We're going to go ahead and get started now, so if you wouldn't mind just taking your seats and pick up the conversation after. Thank you. We have too much feedback. Or is that just enough feedback?
Shut up.
Okay.
Just keep talking.
All right. Today we'll be talking about the Cavalry. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that, and that's great. My name is Beau Woods. I'm an independent security consultant. This is my cohort, Josh Corman, who is with Sonatype, CTO of Sonatype, and Jen Ellis, who's with Rapid7. She does all the great marketing stuff there. All of it.
Yes, all of it single-handedly.
Yes. So Josh is passing out some cool swag to everybody, and I'll kick it off. So
it's not a social movement unless you have a sticker.
Which I already told you enough that you need to know. This is what we'll talk about a little bit today. So kind of a downhill journey that I think a lot of us have followed in a similar path, and then how I kind of came to an epiphany. What the Cavalry is, past, present, and future, and then we'll get into what we're doing. So this is one of the most requested things that we talk about is what is actually going on with what we're doing, and Josh and Jen will talk a lot about that. So my first week in information security, I was fresh off the IT boat over to dissect malware and run incidents and run the foreign filter, and had a call from the help desk because they knew me. They sent it over my way, and basically we had a network worm going around. So all right, one day and you get that cleaned up across an organization of 2,000 desktops, which was pretty good, pretty fun, good break-in. But the day after that, got a call from the help desk again in the natal ICU, the place where they take care of like the really newborn babies who are they can't breathe on their own, or they're going to have some problem. They can't leave the hospital for sometimes 6 weeks or so. Their medical devices were rebooting spontaneously, which is a kind of a new problem in medicine, is that your medical devices now run on computers. And when they reboot, that's not so good for patient care. So I went out and took a look at what was going on. Sure enough, it was the same thing that we had been fighting the day before, but it was now on the medical devices and causing havoc there. So talked to the manufacturer, and basically they said, well, because this is malicious software, we can't really help you. We can't fix it for you. We can't patch the bug that let the virus in. So I said, okay, let me into the system, create an account, or give me the root credentials, or whatever you guys want to do. I got to get in and fix this because we've got patients that are having issues. And they said, we can't do that because it's a medical device, and we just won't let you have that. So having kind of a hacker mindset, that wasn't really good enough for me. So working with my boss, we put together a proposal to take to the CEO of the hospital to basically use hacker tools, use the same vulnerability that the virus was exploiting, break into the medical device, patch the bug, kill the malware, reboot the device, and have it come back online. The CEO signed off on that, and within about 30 minutes, we had executed that plan, and the hospital is back to running normal. And over the past, however long I've been doing this, 7 or 8 years, I realized that that's the kind of biggest impact I've made on the world. It was in my first week, and it was all downhill after that. But I think that that's, to some degree, that's a common experience that a lot of us have. We start out and we get really interested in this InfoSec thing. For whatever reason, we're drawn, we're compelled into it. And as we start going up, we kind of get on this track of inflated expectations. And this is when our passion, our hobby becomes our day job. Right after that, you'll notice we have the peak, and we realize we can't fix all the things, that the systems are broken and that we can't patch them. We just don't have the tools and the capability to fix a business process that doesn't want to pay attention to security. And we get to this trough of disillusion. If you were in the last session in this room, you heard Josh talking about the burnout issue, and we'll get to that in a minute. And that's what happens to a lot of people. A lot of people never come out of the trough of disillusionment. They either move to a different industry, or they take a different path to just get rid of that disillusionment. If you stick with it enough, you get on kind of the road to enlightenment and then the plateau of productivity. And I think that this is a common theme in InfoSec careers. Because Josh covered this extensively in the last session, I won't go into this in great detail. But these are some of the signs of burnout, some of the characteristics of people who are burnt out. And if you're looking at these slides later, you can identify several of these, which it's really, I mean, you look at it and it reads like a symptom list of everybody I've worked with. So I know that this issue affects a lot of people. I'll tell you my disillusionment story. I don't know whether it was truly burnout or whether it was just, give up. But I basically looked at the security thing. I said, every day I work through all the things that come into my inbox and I put them in my outbox. The next day my outbox is cleared and my inbox is full again. No matter how many vacation days I take, the inbox still has just as many things. I can still get to just as many things every day. It never gets any better. So it must not really matter what I'm doing. So instead of getting really frustrated and burning out hard, I kind of went into this mode of like, well, then it doesn't matter, I guess. So I started treating it with a little bit less criticality and severity, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was not the most mature response, right? So what I kind of realized is that the mature response would be to move on to things like body, mind, and soul, right? The things that Josh and Nick talked about in the first Cavalry talk back at B-Sides and at DEFCON in Vegas. The body is things that have the ability to harm or kill people. Mind is things like criminalization of research, where for thinking certain thoughts, that now becomes a crime, and having certain knowledge. The soul, which is the intersection of kind of civil liberties and technology and how the social contract is really changing because of what technology allows us to do. And as I'm sure just about everybody in this room has been asked at some point, which operating system is most secure? And I used to get into this and really have debates with people. I just stopped caring. The truth is, they're all equally insecure in the hands of the wrong person. Which browser is most secure? Same thing. This is one my mom just got a phone this weekend. She said, which one is most secure? Should I get an iPhone? Should I get the Windows, the BlackBerry, the Android? I said, for you, Mom, none of them is going to be most secure. And that's kind of true, and we all have those people in our lives, but that's a pretty common experience. Now we start having to ask ourselves, which automobile is most secure? Which automobile is going to be the one that's not got a buffer overflow condition where somebody through OnStar could jump in and exploit that and take control of the vehicle? Which medical device is most secure? Which insulin pump has an infrared device that isn't susceptible to unauthenticated attackers basically hitting the wrong button and overdosing or underdosing? Which home control is most secure? Which home device? Which thermostat is going to be the one that a software update doesn't cause it to turn off in the middle of the coldest winter in the last 50 years, as happened recently? So these are really important questions. And if you look at a different type of scale, one of replaceability rather than just cost of replacement, you look at credit card assets. Credit card numbers are really replaceable. Credit card company generates a new and sends a new card out to you, and for the cost of $5 worth of plastic, you've basically got a new credit card number. So those are really, really replaceable. On the other side is human life, and that's not replaceable at all. Everything else falls somewhere in the middle. So as we look at what we're spending our time, resources, and money on, it tends to be the credit card data. And that's probably not the best place to spend our resources, because the other ones have more impact, and there's probably more of a difference that we could make because there's a lower hanging bar. So, sitting around thinking about this, you inevitably come to the conclusion that somebody's got to fix this, right? There has to be somebody who's watching it, who's making sure that these bad things don't happen. You look around the room and you see, nobody is. There's no adults standing up. The scariest thought is, we are the adults, right? So it really does fall to us. It's up to us to do something about it. So that led to the Cavalry group, the Cavalry movement. And I'm going to really quickly go through the timeline. Basically, Josh and Nick Percoco at B-Sides Las Vegas and DEFCON last year, 2013, gave a talk. Just basically invited anybody who was interested in the topic to come together and talk about it, to talk about the elephant in the room. That was, as Josh says, the don't tase me, bro phase. just to see if there was general interest, if it had been done 100 times, if there were all these other conditions that we weren't thinking about. And over the last 6 months now, I guess, we've been building and building a group of people who are really concerned about this. At the same time, we've been narrowing down the scope of what it is we really want to do, what it is we really think is going to be the most impactful and can be achieved in a reasonable amount of time. And that currently sits at the body, part of body, mind, and soul. So the devices and things that have the ability to harm people, kill people, to really affect human life and public safety. And that's things like medical devices, cars, public infrastructure, public transit. If anybody took the train in today, you'll know what I'm talking about. The trains run on computers just like everything else. And then home devices. And then we also realized that by demonstrating that public good, we would make the mind part achievable, which is we don't want our industry, our security research, to be considered criminal. We want the criminals to be considered criminal, whereas the good researchers can keep on doing what we're doing. So these are some of the themes that we kind of came to the conclusion we need to do, right? We must be ambassadors of our profession. We must be the voice of technical literacy. We must research that which matters. We must collaborate with each other. We must escape the echo chamber. We must amplify our efforts. There are a lot of things that we must start doing in order to affect this change. And I skipped over this one, but it's just simply a preference chart, right? We prefer certain things over other things. So when you have the choice, take the one that's preferred rather than the one that's not preferred. It's kind of a simple matrix. I went vegetarian for 30 days. I thought it was going to be really hard, but it was actually really easy because every time I sat down, I just had the choice of vegetarian or not. And it was shockingly easy to be a vegetarian. And I think that this lowers the threshold of what's hard to what's achievable. Some potential things that we're looking at doing, and then we'll talk about the things that we actually have started doing. Looking at building a research platform where researchers have a certain role to play in the whole process between there's a thing that's out there and there's a fix for the vulnerability that's found. You have lots of different stages, right? I want to do research. I get access to a device. I do the research. I then publish the research. I find recommendations, work with the manufacturer, get those things fixed, make sure that there's not some kind of a legal regulatory implication, right? Do the public relations thing. These are all separate, discrete components along a chart that you can't do all of them as one person, or at least most people don't like to do all of them. So how do you get more people doing those things? Having conventions and congresses, sitting together with people like ourselves, like our brothers from across the aisle in information technology. And speaking as a security guy, I consider IT across the aisle for me. Sitting down with policymakers, with researchers, with the business leaders, with those types of people to get everybody on the same page, define our goals, and go out. Doing some kind of think tank research, publishing white papers, being thought leaders truly in this kind of new space, and then more collaborative approaches. And I'll have this slide up here. I'll turn it over to Josh and Jen now to talk about some of their success stories. These are some of the ones that we've talked about before, so we can go into those again, but they've been doing some really, really good things most recently, going down and talking to policymakers in Washington.
Okay. Anybody have any questions so far? We keep changing up how we discuss this, so we may have left out some key things, or we may have introduced some new things. No questions yet? Okay. The way I describe this, if I only have 5 minutes, now there's different positions on the field, but one of the ones I've been doing and Jen's been doing for different reasons is when we sliced up the activity, Beau was really instrumental in helping us realize we couldn't do all of body, mind, and soul. There was too much scope. Essentially what we wanted to do was security that mattered. What we found is that as we socialized this at the DerbyCon Constitutional Congress, we had about 100 folks come out to Louisville, Kentucky, spend 2 days with us. We saw the things that resonated most with our talent pool, but then we also took those and tested them with policymakers, the mainstream media, with our neighbors. I almost call it like Fight Club. Go pick a fight with a complete stranger and lose. the challenge was go bring these topics up with someone who isn't from our echo chamber and see where the conversation goes. And things really gravitated towards this concept of safety, right? Safety engineering, like maybe make the security profession disappear. Like what is it evidence that we have been wildly successful? It's that this becomes akin to safety engineering that you might have in other physical disciplines. So right around ShmooCon, we settled in on technologies with the potential to affect human life and public safety. And that leads to 4 quadrants of research. Each are going to have their own kind of kill chain. Those quadrants are medical device security, automotive security, home electronics, and public infrastructure. And people are debating what those 4 quadrants mean, but what we found was that there was existing research and researchers that weren't talking to each other. They may have been doing one part of a kill chain or a chain of influence, but there was activity but not results and impact. And each one of them had different vendors that were affected. They had different government agencies, like in medical it might be Food and Drug Administration, in cars it might be NHTSA, the NISTA. And they also had different regulatory bodies of work, et cetera. But in addition to those 4, what we knew is underneath all of them we would need a hearts and minds PR press corps of sorts, and Jen Ellis' experience there has been invaluable among others. Because we have to be able to communicate these things to the outside world in a way that's not FUD-tastic, it's not sensationalist, and it truly captivates their interest. But we also needed a public policy one, which is where I've been spending a lot of my time, trying to talk to the people who create the laws, change the laws, enforce the laws, and some of us call them Congress critters. But learn the language and the lingo of the people that we don't yet know. And that's really where that ambassador word came in. So to that end, when we have 5 minutes with someone, or even 3 minutes, our basic problem statement is that our dependence on technology is growing faster than our ability to secure it. And people kind of get that. And then your proof points become the car hacks that Charlie did, the medical device hacks that Jay Radcliffe did. These aren't theoretical, these are actual, they're demonstrable. And as vulnerable as they are right now, they're becoming more vulnerable by the moment. So we're not going to, out of thin air, produce brand new research per se. We want to catalyze some new research. So if you're going to pick your new research agenda for this year, we're hoping that you choose something that matters over something that may be more fleeting or just more of a hobby. But at the same time, our early wins thus far have been our 4 C's: collecting, connecting, collaborating, and communicating. Right, so what we're doing is we take a whole bunch of people who didn't know each other in the medical device research field. We pulled them together for a phone call. We compared who's succeeding, who's failing where. We brainstormed some ways to fix those things. So one guy couldn't find medical devices. He couldn't procure them. Another guy had no problem finding them, but he didn't know how to reverse them. Another guy hit an obstacle with the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, saying, well, no one's died yet. Someone else figured out you can go to Department of Homeland Security, the Industrial Controls Cert, and they cared about it. So we started comparing notes, and people got smarter. They got stronger. And then we looked at, okay, well, why wasn't the manufacturer listening to you? You're a hospital. There's a great guy, Scott Irvin, we discovered through the Rapid 7 conference. He said, well, I'm a small hospital. We found some issues, and the medical device manufacturer wasn't that interested. I said, okay, you're small. Who's big? And ultimately came down to, there are large hospitals that do bulk evaluation of lots of technology. They almost become a de facto consumer reports of sorts. It becomes an economic lever. How do you get a bulk purchaser and evaluator to command the attention of the device manufacturer? And what we're doing is just fuzzing a chain of influence. We're trying to map out how does an intent become an outcome. And by connecting those researchers, collecting their existing research, collaborating, brainstorming, some really nice private wins have happened. So in that particular case, that bulk purchaser sponsored a weekend-long hackathon. 3 red teams were paid money to come hack on these devices for the weekend. They routed 50 devices with very little effort in front of that bulk purchaser and in front of some of the device manufacturers themselves. And as a consequence of that demonstration of capability and vulnerability without any government regulation whatsoever, at least that hospital has now added headcount for a permanent red team to add that to their device evaluation criteria. So some of our friends got contracts if you're just doing this for money. Some people got a new career because now they're taking their red teaming capabilities from maybe a PCI gap assessment, and now they're putting it into medical device evaluation, which was the most fulfilling part of your first job in a hospital. And you have these manufacturers who had no idea just how vulnerable they are. And the rumor is from one of the red teams that they're adding 12 net new headcount for security engineers and security architects to their product lines. I mean, a lot of us are very cynical, and we thought this idea was a horrible one, and we're going to crash and burn and fail miserably. And we were perfectly prepared to have that happen. But some of these things aren't as intractable if you just start trying and failing and fail fast and iterate. So thus far, 6 months in, the question I've been asked is, are you encouraged or discouraged? And we have similar narratives for cars and car security. But these little private experimentations, I'm encouraged. You want to talk a little bit about policy or perception? Or?
Yeah, sure. Since I put a microphone on and everything, I might as well. So from my perspective, so there are two separate elements here. There's what Rapid7's doing, which I can tell you a little bit about, and then there's the Cavalry. Very simply, what Rapid7 is doing is we're really concerned about the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. For those who are not familiar, it's the federal anti-hacking law. It's 30 years old. It was passed before widespread internet adoption started, which makes it really timely and good and useful. And basically, the wording is it's all about exceeding authorized access. And it doesn't define authorized access, which means that, for example, scanning for heartbleed is a violation of the CFAA. So we're pretty concerned about that because we have a lot of researchers, the Metasploit community we care about. So that's what Rapid7's doing. We're trying to look at the CFAA and understand how the security research community can move forward in the sort of current climate of legislative unease or a lack of clarity. So on the Cavalry side, I think the reason that piece is so important in my mind is that we're at this kind of cusp. We're right at this point where connectivity is absolutely exploding, and physical and virtual, there is no line. That line is irrelevant now. Security equals physical safety. That is going to become more and more apparent, and the security community has been amazingly successful at building a huge wall around itself. And in the security community, we prize credibility. We prize deep technical knowledge. Those things are good things. They are strong values. But the challenge is that the way that we have prized them means that we've created a wall around ourselves. We've become insular, and we've made it so that we've effectively made ourselves irrelevant to the broader community in their mind. Not in our minds. We understand the relevance. We understand that when you're talking about cars and medical devices, this stuff is incredibly important. And even if you're talking about heartbleed, it's incredibly important. So we understand that, but the broader community hasn't had the opportunity to understand that. They don't know how to talk to us. We haven't built good collaboration models. And so my feeling, based on working with a lot of security researchers, is that there are a lot of security researchers who really do have this view. They really see that building those collaboration models is critical. They see that we are at this inflection point, that the world has the potential to become a darker place. And I don't want to get fuddy, but that is my view, is that when we have 800 connected devices that weren't connected 3 years ago, but are going to be connected 3 years from now, and a lot of those are something that relates to a physical impact in some way, I think that if we are not building security into the process now, it is going to become a darker place. And I think other researchers see that. I think that based on talking to Josh and Nick, Coco, and Beau, I think lots of people see that and have that view. But the feeling I get from people is they're like, we don't know how to do something about that. We don't know how to change the negative perception of hackers. We don't know how to navigate the law. We're worried that we're breaking the law. We don't know who to talk to about that. We don't know how to tell the story, how to make it impactful to people, and to make it simple. And I think that right now, there is an amazing opportunity for the community to work together to solve this problem and to pull people like me in. And I'll put my hand up to it. I am not technical at all. I apologize, I'm not. And you know, most of the time when I'm having conversations with people like you, I feel like the idiot in the room. But I know that my value as the idiot in the room is that if you can explain it to me and make me understand it, and I'll put the time in to get to that point because I care, then I can explain it to everybody else. That's the value of the idiot in the room. And I am your idiot in the room.
You are no idiot.
Thanks.
Now, one of the things we figured out, though, it's one thing to collect our researchers, and we've done some really good things. It's another to put them, you know, what somebody called it, I think it was Doug, they said Mr. Geek goes to Washington, or Mr. Hacker goes to Washington, right? We are stunningly bad at talking to the outside world, stunningly bad. Think of your best in-conference, in-echo chamber presenters. We've tried putting them in front of policymakers or government officials, and it hasn't gone so well. We use a lot of jargon, we use a lot of internal knowledge, we make assumptions that they know that disclosing something tends to protect people eventually. Like they still are at the point where they think if someone reveals a car flaw, it's gonna equip bad guys to do bad things, and so you're a menace to society for disclosing anything. The disclosure wars we went through 15, 20 years ago are brand new to them. And it's fairly jarring and abrupt. So while we've had success collapsing the medical device researchers, while recently we just started collapsing the car hackers, and we're going to be publishing probably next month a list of the top recommendations that every car manufacturer can act upon now before there's any sort of regulation or oppressive government reaction. We want to frame the argument. It's not going to be comprehensive, but we're starting a dialogue where we're offering pro bono, altruistic researchers who are willing to educate and, what do you say, reach across the aisle with the medical. We already did it with medical, we're going to do it with auto. And at least start building those bridges so that this can become a natural byproduct of their engineering practices. Right after us, Mark Stanislav and Zach Linier will be revealing their Build It Securely project, which is aimed towards smaller home electronics. It's one thing to get through a Medtronic or a Philips Medical or a Tesla or a Ford or a GM. Those are big companies with big risk management programs. It's another when it's an Indiegogo sized project or a Kickstarter sized project. They're not going to have a CSO. They may have 2 guys. So there's at least a namespace, as Beau likes to call it, of if you want to do something on one of these areas and it's basically aligned with this mission, we're going to force multiply or amplify or clean or communicate to the various stakeholders. Even if you're not the best presenter, we'll figure out the right ways to use their language. This is why you're seeing Justine say it's okay to use cyber sometimes if they lead off with it. But I completely agree with Andrea that you don't want to just meet them with a vague term. You land on cyber, you expand, and you add more clarity and more terms of art. But just the biggest epiphany we've had besides the pockets of activity is that we really need soft skills. So one of the things Jen says, she's the idiot in the room, she gave professional media training at B-Sides San Francisco for the first time for most of the people in that room. So as much as we like to think we're performance artists like Justine said, a lot of you have never had that. So we're also starting to recognize that some level of professional development, some level of soft skills, even the burnout session earlier about talking about learning empathy, the thing that's keeping us back is not more technology or more hack, it's more communication skills. And it's turning out to be a nice little journey.
So the one thing I would add, and not to harp on about Heartbleed, but it is topical, the timing kind of worked out quite well in that regard. But Heartbleed for me has been kind of inspiring to the degree that the response of the community, the drive of the community to educate people on the risk, the desire of the community to help people protect themselves, that's inspiring. And you know, if you look at something like this, there's no way for people outside of this community to have a clue whether they're at risk or not and what to do about it, unless we really help them with that. And I think like we can all take heart in the fact that people, no pun intended, in the fact that people really do want to help the broader community, they want to solve these problems, and that when we work together, we can move the needle. I believe that. Questions?
A couple more slides, and then we'll open it up for questions. We wanted to give you guys a long time to ask questions. We have several resources if you just want to hop out on the internet and look at these. The website, iamthecavalry.org. We have a Google Groups discussion group, which has led to some really, really good connections, some good conversations. And then we've got a Twitter feed. It's @IamTheCavalry. This is a quote that I know Josh is very...
It's Adam's quote, yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's a great quote, right? Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world because it's the only thing that ever really has, right? And that's how we feel, is we want to change the world. We want to make the world a better place. And we think that it's achievable and it's a tractable problem. So I'll leave this up as we do questions so that you can get the site and the Twitter. Who wants to lead off with questions? Yes.
Do we have a stick?
Do we want to stop recording or leave it open?
Do people care if the questions are public?
If you have a private question, let us know. We'll stop the recording and then we're back on.
Let's go.
I think there's one right behind you.
Thanks. Jen, you mentioned how the industry is pretty, I guess insular is the word used, and I agree with that, but there's also this, I feel that there's also this perpetuation in the media of us also being insular, and that kind of that kind of feeds that as well, and I don't know if that's kind of a vicious circle, but how do we try to at least slow down or reverse that trend where media represents us and shows us in hoodies and ski masks?
So yes, everybody loves the picture of the hacker in the balaclava. Honestly, it's a process. I think that the obvious answer is that it's education. So the more that we work with media, the more that we create trust and transparency, the more that we demonstrate value. Right now, what sells is the idea of hackers as inline skate wearing, dreadlock yielding people who want to break into shit. And we as a community haven't really done enough to change that perception by giving positive role models in contrast. And what I mean by that is, it's not that the community isn't doing the action, taking the action. The community is taking the action. And some really amazing things come out of this community, but largely we tell the story to each other. And so we need to kind of get better at telling that story to the broader community, and like, that's difficult and it's scary. And that's where people like me come in, and I'm always happy to work with anyone and give them ideas and make introductions to press and walk them through the process.
Sorry, now as a follow-up, do you see any sort of interest in mainstream media organizations, your New York Times, Washington Post, all those kind of organizations,
huge interest
in wanting to learn and get better and have?
If you look at New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Bloomberg, Reuters, AP, they all have Wired, Mashable, etc. They all have dedicated security writers, and over the past 5 years, they've increased their security teams. Some of them have actually pretty big security teams. Those people are like actively looking for opportunities to write, and like that's the mainstream media. And then there's a huge amount of other press that are wonderful, and they are definitely looking to build those relationships with people and have opportunities to work with them.
We had sometimes referred to the Cavalry as maybe a platform as a service for researchers. So like, think of it like APIs, right? That's a bi-directional for mainstream. They're so tired of like having a hit and miss with certain researchers who use jargon that they can't understand or nothing's quotable, that some of them have kind of figured out that if I start with, if it's anything slightly related to this Cavalry or public safety message, they'll come to Nick, they'll come to her, they'll come to Beau. Washington Post covered us already. Wall Street Journal spent the last couple weeks, 8 weeks, talking to various members of the people we've worked with. CNN has been doing it. So some people think we're premature. We should wait for that Cuyahoga River on fire moment that Andrea referred to. I actually think we're probably a little behind because we're dovetailing nicely with that dependence. We're dovetailing nicely with mainstream media attention and focus. Whenever we go on the Hill, whether it's for her purposes or my corporate ones or whatnot, they're asking questions that are off script because they see us as maybe an independent voice of technical literacy. They're used to asking vendors and getting a vendor answer. So they're really appreciative, and we're non-threatening. But moreover, we have to build these muscles, and that's one of the things, you didn't use that word, but I really got from Jen is, when that Cuyahoga River moment comes, we're not ready. So we are building those muscles. If you saw David Kennedy's first testimony on healthcare.gov security, he did a great job. Some of it was luck, some of it was preparation. He was more prepared the second time, but they beat him up really hard. And we're kind of learning by taking those bruises now, and we're learning how to speak more effectively each time we go. And it turns out that they're not these clueless, corrupt people that many of us project that they are. Some of them are right out of law school. They're really young. They're really clever. They ask good questions. They know what they know and they don't know. And mileage varies. But I think the key now is to build those muscles. But moreover, one of the things I really want people not to leave the room with is the cavalry isn't the three of us, and the cavalry isn't someone who does reversing on their insulin pump. The cavalry is everybody here that is willing and able to help, and that may simply be getting outside the echo chamber and speaking somewhere. It might be going to your university and giving a talk on the need for more researchers or what kind. It might be doing something, getting a job. Like one of the guys in the room here, he's a device driver developer. He said, well, what can I do? And I said, well, can you get a job at a industrial controls group up the road? So some people like, Kyle Osborne took a job at Tesla because he wanted to work on Tesla car security. Kristen Paget, one of our best hardware engineers, she took a job at Tesla. Other people are saying, are there similar jobs at Mercedes or Ford or GM? Or in the medical device field. Pyro from 303 just took a job at the Mayo Clinic, and he's hiring. And there are ways that any one of you can help. If you're a project manager, we suck at our own product management. If you're a PR professional, we need the training and the outreach. So we don't want this to be, look at all the cool stuff we're doing, because we're going to be limited by the participation we have. What we really want to see is there some way that you can help and maybe get some personal fulfillment out of it like we have?
Yep, good questions. Yes.
So what do you see as, beyond automotives, what do you see as the sort of next area?
I think when I've been talking to people, automotive and medical really resonates the most with them. That's an area too that it affects more people's lives, right? Everybody just about has a car, drives a car, so they're thinking about it every time they get in the car, or every time we talk to them, they're thinking about the experience they just had in the car. Medical affects a smaller group of people, but you might argue in a more critical way. Home devices, locks, thermostats, a lot of things aren't quite as critical, and public infrastructure, there's more people talking about it, and it's more removed from, so I think probably the core, the thing that I've heard the most is auto and medical. Those are really the ones that resonate with people. Now that said, if we get traction and like the Build It Securely project is great in the small Internet of Things Kickstarter guys, and anybody can kind of adopt that and use it. So that's great progress and great traction. We didn't initiate that, Duo Security initiated that, and they're doing a really good job of it. Although it's not technically fully announced, I guess. Weren't they going to announce it today?
Well, they've announced it, but details to follow.
Details to follow. So without stealing their thunder, because they're coming up next, and you should stick around for it. That's my segue. There's a lot of things that are going on, and we're a little bit opportunistic. So if we come out of auto and we publish a great, 5 steps to being a better automaker, safety, security stuff, and some other industry comes to us and says, can you adapt that for us? And we'll give you some of our teams so you can understand our challenges. We'd probably jump on that, right?
Yeah, the question is, what do you see as being the next thing? Because you're going to go do it.
You're going to help.
That's what it is.
Well, for me, wearable devices.
Wearable?
I agree.
Doug and I were talking about that in DC a couple weeks ago. One of the things we haven't said is people are getting impatient with our lack of formation of a formal entity. I think we're finally there. We wanted to get through RSA. RSA gave us 3 days of booth space. We had a 2-day workshop at B-Side San Francisco. And we were really hoping a 501c3 was going to adopt us. And I came this close, so we didn't have to start from scratch and do fundraising and overhead. We still might make one more run at it, but we were trying to debate between a 501c3, which is an educational foundation, which can't do any direct lobbying, or a 501c6, which is a professional and industry association, which can do a little bit of lobbying, and B Corps and S Corps. I think at this point, it's really clear that the most resonant topic has been public safety. It's been education, and I think we're going to do a C3. Beau went to work with a mentor of his on a business plan yesterday. I think that'll make it much, much clearer how to directly participate. But in the meantime, the very next session, if you're at all interested in Raspberry Pis or small electronics or whatnot, there's direct ways to help and get engaged on that. If you want to submit to DEFCON, DEFCON has 3.5 tracks dedicated to public safety issues. At B-Sides Chicago and ThoughtCon, we're going to have Craig Smith from Open Garages, which is a repeatable, franchisable car hacking schema. There's so many things that we're going to put in front of you that if one of them looks like shaped at your skill level and interest, we're going to make it very easy for you to start doing something there, but also we're going to amplify any work that you do that we can. So for us, the next step is the business plan and the formation. Immediately following that, though, it's to amplify you with whatever contribution you want to make.
Yep.
More questions?
I think we have time for at least one more.
Yeah, so I
5
had up
minutes.
in the back first, and then 2 hands blank.
It's a comment. I just wanted to point out that all of you guys will probably know Chaos Computer Club. Some of you guys might know that they've existed since 1981, and they now really are part of information freedom, information security society all across Europe. They are now part of the culture, and that takes a lot of guts. I think we need more structures like that, and I think you guys are on a similar track, and it would be great if you guys could continue down that track. Because in Germany today, for instance, no piece of legislation happens without CCC looking at it first, and their opinion counts a lot. And that is a security committee, and that is a civil society, all rolled into one. And you guys are really on that track, so all power to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, he's the second person who mentioned that, and what we really probably should do is, instead of reinventing the CCC wheel, we should get some Sherpa guidance from some folks. So we'd love that introduction. We know some of them, but pointed at the right folks. Yeah.
So 2 other hands. I think we got time for one of them. So who wants to talk?
So wrestle now.
All right, go for it.
Oh, we definitely got to.
I'm curious if, as security professionals, you want to draw the line at cybersecurity, or you want to include physical security as well, because we've all seen things like the high security tubular locks that are put on places where they really shouldn't be, like elevators that shouldn't have access, or perhaps gun safes. And that's a similar, some would argue, a public safety issue, and yet people sell them as a high security. So that's just one example, but that's not cyber, but it's still, based on the lock picking over there, still part of our community.
It's a really good question. I don't think we've talked about that much.
The thing that I would say is, like, what we showed, what we talked through is where the focus of the people who have been most vocally involved in the conversation is right now. But the goal of all of this is that everybody in the community will get involved and do something. And if you are somebody who has a view on that issue, then go do. And I'll help you, and we'll put you in touch with a lawyer so that they can vet it. And you know, that's really kind of the thing. Is like, the intent is not for us to pick what gets researched. The intent is for us to facilitate the conversation between the researcher and the broader community so that we can actually move the needle and achieve the goal, and to do it in a way that protects you guys. That's really the goal.
Yeah, and we were going to have Katie Mazuris here. She's been very active as well, and there's some Bug Crowd guys here. We're really thrilled about that element as well, because if you think about it, Microsoft used to sue researchers for like a decade. And it took a long time for them to go through their 5 stages of grief, you know, which is the way Katie's talk's awesome if you haven't seen it. It's one of those 6-minute, 40-second pechakuchas on the 5 stages of disclosure grief. It's amazing. But her work on the ISO documents and what Bug Crowd's doing is there's a very real risk that as we do something for public safety and public good, these new vendors who have never dealt with disclosure or researchers who are going to sue the pants off of us. That's why we've reached out to resources like Andrea. Paul Rosenzweig's a law professor at George Washington. He came out to B-Sides and did shots of Jaeger because he said cyber war. We are creating the ambassadors and the cross, you know, bi-directional learning, because we need to learn their world if we're going to affect it. And to that end, sometimes it's advice, right? So if you're about to do a project and you're afraid, is this a litigious vendor? We might have an answer. Bugcrowd is, I believe, donating some of their resources to the Build It Securely project. And to her point about you want to start something, we weren't going to do Internet of Things, home electronics for quite some time because we were resource constrained and it looked like a really hard problem. But to Zach and Mark's credit, they're like, we really care about this. There's going to be a lot of these. And they just did it. So this isn't something where you should wait around for a big blinky light that says, go do this. If something strikes a chord in your heart and it has anything to do with what we're trying to promote, we're going to help you.
The we is all of us.
Yes.
And to sound incredibly cheesy, you are the cavalry.
No one else is. One more question.
Anybody?
If anyone has experience starting a 501c3, we would love to help.
Yes, absolutely.
Or business plans.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No more questions? One more?
Anthony?
Well, as I said, I've helped with a couple of creations of 501s.
Okay.
So,
Okay. And if you haven't noticed, this room, including Andrea's talk, has been the cavalry track. So we're still one more official talk to go, but even the Wait, Wait, Don't Phone Me game show may in fact involve subject matter related to this topic. So, you know, we've been slow going. We've been giving this the time to simmer and mature. We really are getting our swagger, and it's working. We have unsolicited inbound calls from media and from policymakers who are asking well-formed questions. It's incredibly encouraging. And the one last little really happy note is we mostly talked about that medical thing, but there's this really strange synergistic thing where the individual efforts of people at Tesla to make their cars more secure, plus us congratulating them and connecting them with new resources, they're getting a lot of their plans done faster. So if you haven't seen it, back to that disclosure point, they put up a coordinated disclosure policy on their website and have a Hall of Fame. They are skipping the 10 years of suing researchers stage. And when the article on the cavalry showed up in The Guardian, apparently Elon Musk got wind of it and asked how they can be even more differentiated and do more things like that. So I think simply the act of talking about this in accessible ways is going to create an environment where anyone's efforts will be enhanced and amplified. It's my sincere hope that their competitors meet and exceed their initial steps here. We might skip 10 years of suing researchers. So anyhow, we're very encouraged. We hope this is at least remotely interesting to you and that you get involved because without you,
we're just talking in the echo chamber.
All right, thank you.